Today's parasha is Chayei Sarah, as was told to us by Brian this morning. And the message is called Circles of Time. I'm going to start off by, have you guys ever heard of the phrase, chicken or the egg? All right. I want you to imagine something. This is an egg. It's not, but imagine it's an egg. This is a chicken. Imagine it's a chicken. So, in the way we think linear here in the Western world. So the concept of chicken or the egg means that one came before the other. And if I took this egg and I placed it here, imagine that the egg's still here. That would make sense to us, right? That this would follow. But it doesn't make sense that there's nothing before this. Right? We get confused. What happens before the egg, right? Well, you get ideas like the Big Bang Theory because of this very problem. Okay, so something had to have ignited this, right? There had to have been something created. There had to have been a beginning. So what was the beginning to this end? Well, linear thinking doesn't allow us to know. But if I imagine, now take this straight line, and you curve it, and you connect it, and it becomes a circle. You never see the gap between this egg, this chicken, and this egg. You see a circle of chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg, chicken, egg. You never have a problem. There is neither beginning or end. It's circular time. We think linear. And never fails, every Chayei Sarah Shabbat, this comes into my head. And the only reason I know that is because I look back in time at my teachings after I came up with this teaching. I always do that. I'll go backwards in time and say, okay, on this Shabbat, this parasha, did I teach it? And if I did, what did I teach? And it never fails. God continues to give me the same concept every time. 3 Chayei Sarah Shabbats, I begin to think on time. And this is how it started last night for me. So my wife, my daughter, and I had a Shabbat meal. They lit the candles, and I said the blessing over my daughters. We sang Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Malachim, the blessing, normal blessing to the angels. And started to eat. And we were reflecting, and my daughter started telling, I said, okay, it's time to read the Shabbat story for today, Eliana. She says, I already know it, Dad. I said, no, you don't. We haven't read it yet. So I start reading it, and she's finishing my sentence. Well, because in school, she learned it. And I said, okay, well, your school did a good job today. So let's watch a little puppet video. She goes, Dad, I already saw this puppet video. I said, well, when did you see the puppet video? She said, I saw it today at school. And she's like saying exactly what the puppet video is saying. So I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And I said, well, I don't have much time at all I'm not going to have any time to give you lessons or anything. And so I started, my wife had posted a picture on Facebook of them, lighting the Shabbat candles. And her phone kept, as she was giving Ziva a bath, the phone kept going off. And I look at the phone, and it's a notification that people were liking it or something. And I look at it, and I start going through the timeline. Just, on the phone, there's a timeline of pictures and photos, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. And I come across a picture of people I knew when I was very young, from 5 years old. And I'm looking at this photo, and I'm thinking, wow, man, they all look so weird, right? They're older now. I mean, we were 5. And I began to think about life and death, because it was about Sarah. And the time that we have here, and the impact that we make. And I get up and I begin to put the dishes in the kitchen. Tasha's upstairs watching the kids, and I begin to walk around how you have those islands in your kitchens. And I'm walking around the island in a circle, thinking. And as I'm walking in a circle, I'm thinking, well, this isn't it, right? I mean, I'm thinking about what my impact on the world is, what I'm doing in my own life. And I thought to myself, well, time is running out, because you live and then you die, and it's over. And as I'm walking in a circle around this island, I said to myself, well, wait a minute. Time is not linear. That's not what it is. I said, time is circular. Now, the fact that I'm walking in a circle might have caused me to think that. But I didn't cause myself to walk in a circle. I think God did, because he's giving me this message as I'm walking around the kitchen. And I say, okay, well, you're right. Time is circular. And you know what? We have an eternity to impact lives. And when I said we had an eternity to impact lives, I remembered what I had said to somebody weeks ago. He said, well, you're really doing a great job. You're a vice president here at this company. You're a rabbi. You're doing these things. I said, that's nothing. I said, that's not my impact. That won't be my impact. My impact is my children. My children are the legacy that I create. Nothing else. What they bring to the world and how they benefit the world, that becomes my legacy, and that goes on, and they remember grandma and grandpa, and grandma and grandpa is remembered. And their children and their children's children and their children's children's children. And I'm sitting here telling this guy this because it's a very Jewish concept that you have to invest in your children, because it's your children that will carry on the mission of God, because God's mission cannot happen in this blink. This blink of 70 to 120 years. David and Solomon both died at age 70. 70 years these men lived. They made a good impact in their time, but their impact was greater later. Because you can't possibly make the greatest impact in the time frame that you're on this earth. Abraham was given a promise. You will have children that number the sands of the seashore and the stars in the sky. It will be a great and awesome people. And he died with 2 sons. Two main sons. He had 6 more with Hagar. In this parashah, he married a woman named Keturah. Okay? Keturah is literally Hagar. And what he had done is he had made her an honest woman. See, Sarah kicked her out of the camp. I don't want her here. And Abraham didn't want to do so because he had a child with her and he cared for her. But he did it anyway because God said, listen to your wife, kick her out of the camp. Well, once his wife dies, he's free to bring her back. Now, he's an old man at this time. He's not going to marry a young woman and have more kids. He brings back Hagar, and he protects her, and he has some more children with her. This is the oral tradition, but it makes a lot of sense. And so, again, that moment in time came back around for Abraham. It circled back around. The experience with Hagar was not linear. There wasn't a beginning and an end. It was forever. So we have to understand that. With every cycle of this particular parasha, my mind and my heart begin to think about time in a very different way. I didn't teach it this way before because I read it. But you can't help but ponder it in that it begins with an extraordinary end. The parasha begins with an extraordinary ending. The death of a matriarch, the death of Sarah, the wife of Avraham Avinu, our father, Abraham. Even for those of you that were born in Christian tradition or adopted Christian tradition, Avraham is your father as well. He's the father of the faith of the God of Israel. Without Avraham, there would be no Isaac, and there would be no Jacob, and there would be no David, and there would be no Yeshua. And there'd be no Jewish people, and there'd be no Christian faith. So, Avraham Avinu, our father. It's interesting how a death to us in the Western world seems so final. It seems very final. I think about it, I went through a period of time in my own life, I thought about death a lot. And you don't want to happen. You don't want it to happen. Because the next life, you're not sure of, to be honest. Not only that, because we think linear. Because we think there's a beginning and we think there's an end. And so, you think about this concept of death, and it's very final for us. We're taught that from a young age. When you start something, it must necessarily finish at some point. You go, you get a job, you're going to stop working. At some point, you'll retire. Well, you know, it's interesting that my dad and I, we don't know what that means, that word retire. That means to go to bed at night. The Jewish model is that you're always going to work. It just depends on what you're working. No one really retires. And if you do, you might as well die. What else is there? We've actually been told by God himself, you will be working by the sweat of your brow. And that doesn't mean that, oh, by the way, we work really hard for 30 years, and then all of a sudden we retire. It's a weird Western idea that is not biblical, and it's definitely not, from the roots of our heritage. But we learn this in our schools and in our lives and through our teaching, that there's a point to finish. But the ancient cultures of the world, including those in the scriptures and our ancestors, the Hebrews, have always understood time, the past, the present, and the future, as a circular event. I was watching the movie King Arthur this week, and one of Arthur's knights, they went to a great battle against the Saxons. And their job was to protect and save this young Roman boy who supposedly could have made it to become bishop and potentially pope someday. And these knights went, they captured these people, and they were just supposed to get the guy, but because Arthur and his knights were so great, they ended up getting an entire village and trying to free these people, and they ended up doing so. But at the end, there was this great big final battle. There always is. And these knights, they were finally free because they did their last duty to Rome, and they were able to they didn't have to go to this battle. But Arthur was going to stay and fight for the land of Britain. And the knights were driving, were off, taking the other people away so that you can get away, and they're sitting there looking at each other, and they just feel terrible inside that they're letting their commander fight on his own. And they look at each other, and you see that thing happen where, I agree, you agree, we all agree. They smile, they go get their armor on, and they show up, and Arthur's there, not by himself anymore, but he has his knights. They go to battle, and one of them dies. Well, they're burying these guys at the end. And one guy's sitting next to the grave, and he's drinking an alcoholic beverage, clearly, and he pours some on the grave and says, have a drink. And I kind of thought it was funny, but if you actually read into that, there's something about it. Because he didn't see that man as dead. And then another guy's looking at his grave, and he's talking to him, and he says, we'll be along soon. And when the guy said that, it's like, oh, it gripped me. Because you put yourself, I have a keen ability to put myself in somebody else's shoes. And I put myself in that guy's shoes, staring at the dead grave of his friend, and he says, we'll be along soon. Understanding, knowing imminently that he was going to be there soon. We ignore it. No, I'm not going to think about it. When someone in our family dies, we're not going to look at them and say, we'll be along soon. This man had no qualm with that because he saw life as a circular event. The line struck me as he was speaking to the spirit of the dead body, to the soul of the man, not the bones. Even though the body was buried, the spirit lived, and that ending was ultimately a new beginning, and they would circle back and see each other again soon. You see, philosophically, we all agree with this circular view of time. Not one of you in here wouldn't agree with that. If you believe in God of Israel, if you believe in his son, the Mashiach, Yeshua, you believe in this circular view of time. Because your soul will live on. You believe in an eternity, that where time doesn't exist. When we go to Olam Haba, what do they say of Olam Haba? There will be no time. There will just be existence. You see, the Jewish thought is interesting. There's, in philosophy, Nietzsche and all these others, they come up with this, I think, therefore I am. It's the opposite in Judaism. It's I am, therefore I think. Cause and effect is the opposite. It's the effect then the cause. It's not the cause then the effect. So we think differently, but guess what? Our brains are wired to the environment that we've been birthed in. But our souls are wired to the existential that we cannot comprehend. And there is a conflict between spirit and flesh, between mind and soul. Today, for this Shabbat, let's just imagine that time is not linear, that it's circular. The watch on your wrist, the clock on the wall in the back, is not a timeline, but a circle. Simply because time does not begin or stop, it continues without beginning and end. In the same way, days and years are also circular. We realize this fact in our festival cycles, or the Moedim. Every year, we live out a life cycle of events. The same events yearly. And does that not feel weird? Every year we keep Sukkot, and every year we keep Rosh Hashanah, every year we keep Yom Kippur, every year the moons change, and they rise and they come up, and it's a fingernail, and then it's no longer a fingernail, but it's a half moon and a whole moon. It's as if the same point in time happens over and over and over. With a circular view of time, our perspective on the beginning and end of the earth and man changes. Your perspective on the beginning and the end of this world and man must change. No longer is the beginning, and the end, but a continual cycle of beginnings and endings. For instance, we feel that we start to live once we're born, correct? When we're born, we became alive. That's our beginning. That's our start. We're the chicken or we're the egg. I'm not sure. You and I would be the egg because we came out of our mother hen. But somewhere in time, an egg was there without a chicken. That would have been Adam and Eve. But Eve would have been an egg because she came out of a chicken. So we think there's the beginning. We're born. We're conceived. But what did God say to Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu? He says, before you were in your mother's womb, I knew you. Well, what does that even mean? That he thought of him? That he thought, you know what, I'm going to create this Jeremiah, this Yirmiyahu, I am going to create him. Or did he really exist? You see, when man came alive, this is interesting. God formed a vessel. Excuse me. He formed a vessel out of dirt and dust and mud. And he shaped the vessel and he gave it all of these parts. And then he breathed. He breathed into the nostrils of that vessel. And the vessel was not alive without the breath of God. The essence of God himself was poured into this vessel. God created with his breath. Just as he created words and he created the Torah, and the Torah is life to us. All of these things coming from God, timeless. I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. It suggests that our beginning is even before we were born. I have a belief that one day when we stand before Melech HaMelechim, the King of Kings, we're going to ask him questions, and we're going to say to him things that, like, how did you even think about having me come here? we're going to be completely surprised at what was and what is. You know, our solar system is all circular. Like, we're in a circular solar system. But space, halal, space. Is space a circle? I don't know. All we know is our galaxy, which is a circle. And we're this tiny speck on the edge of a galaxy, the Milky Way. And all we know is that this stuff is going on. And one day, God's going to open his mouth and he's going to shed light onto everything for us. And the things that you care about will become real petty. Whoa. You mean that's it? We won't even be able to comprehend. We can only use 10% of our brain. We'll have to tap into the other 90, obviously, to really capture this. But it's an amazing thing to even think about. To think about the greatness of God. Realize that's what this message really is about. So in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, 1 through 8, it says, "To everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under heaven." Now check this out. A time to be born, a time to die. To plant, to pluck up, to kill, to heal, to break down, to build up, to weep, to laugh, to mourn, to dance, to cast away stones, to gather stones, to embrace, to refrain from embracing, to get, to lose, to keep, to cast away, to rend, to sow, to keep quiet, to speak, to love, to hate, to war, to peace. Everywhere in the world where there is someone mourning, there's someone at the completely opposite spectrum at that very moment. For someone's end, there's a beginning. This passage represents beginnings and endings, all piled up onto each other. For every death, there's a birth. When you're sad somewhere in the world, someone else is extremely happy. Rather than viewing this passage from our Western understanding, linear, let's view it from our new found understanding of this circular view of time. From the ancients' perspective. Look, think of it. Laugh, cry. Laugh, cry. Laugh, cry. You take that line of chicken and eggs and you bring it together. We all go through this. If you read it linear, it suggests that you're going forward and you'll never come back. So if you've mourned a death at some point in time, you should never mourn death again. You've learned how to mourn, you've learned what it is, and you're now advancing into time. No, you come back to that same feeling, that same dread. And that's interesting. We're all familiar with this example that addresses the sin cycle of man in Judges, correct? The book of Judges provides us an outline for the sin cycle of the Jewish people. Man continued to sin. They were forgiven. Then they sinned again. And then they were forgiven again. And then they sinned again. And then they were forgiven again. Similarly, we all fall in the same manner as those that fell before us, regardless of the lessons from the past. It appears and seems that every man and every woman must experience the self-same feelings, the same sin, the same forgiveness, the sameness. It is almost like the same point in time. You experience the same sin that David did, that the men of Israel did, that the men of the Brit Chadashah, the New Covenant, New Testament did. You sin just as they do in your minds. If you didn't, and you'd be perfect, one, but think about it. Wouldn't you think that if we have the book, the outline, that we would just follow it and we wouldn't do it again? We shouldn't repeat what already happened in a line of events. But we do, because we come back around. To say that we're not in a sin cycle today is wrong. We sin, then we're forgiven. Then we sin, then we're forgiven. Then we sin, and we're forgiven. And interestingly, God made it easier for us. Now we don't have to continually go to the temple and kill a bunch of animals. We've got one sacrifice. The continual rise and fall of man is the same concept as if you were to get into a ship, set out to explore the world, and set your sails for the west, traveling in a straight line. You'll ultimately arrive back to your starting point. Columbus, in 1492, sailed the ocean blue, assuming that the world was flat, was a straight line, was linear. We're going to ultimately arrive to a place where we're going to fall off. Well, he's not falling off. He's going in a circle. He doesn't realize it, but he's going in a circle. If we were to stand here, walk in a straight line for as long as we could do it, and continue to walk in a straight line, we would come back here, and I don't know what time that would be or how long that would be until we came back, but we would find our ways right back here. Throughout the universe, there are an infinite number of circles, some small, some large, and the most obvious of these extremes are the orbits of atoms and solar systems, the repeating intervals of time, whether they're seconds or thousands of years. We can all be represented by a circle. Our Earth rotates on its axis once completely every single day, as it simultaneously rotates around the sun once completely every single year. And at the same point every day, we experience the same point in time that we did the prior day. Right now it says 12:15. We experienced 12:15 yesterday the same way we're experiencing it today. It is not the past, nor is it the future. It is the same point in time repeating itself. That's hard for us to put our heads around. It's hard because we realize that every day is different. Our hair gets gray. That's a change. Our eyes begin to fade. Our ears begin to lose their sound. Our bodies begin to hurt a little more. We seem to understand death and decay more and more. But imagine if we were still in Gan Eden, where there was no decay, where there was no time. We would repeat every day the same point in time, and there would be no beginning and no ending, just existing. Just as God says to Moshe, I am. He exists without beginning and without end. This will be Olam Haba. But to grasp it is always a difficult feat because we experience death. Nothing we have seen alive has lived forever. From the animals to man, even to the trees, the whole earth is cursed with the curse of death. But we are promised a rebirth through Yeshua. This parasha, Avraham buried his wife in the cave Machpelah. And Avraham had to come to terms with the death of his princess. But he did not see this as an end, rather as a new beginning. Genesis, Breshit 23, verse 1, it says, And Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba. The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Avraham came to mourn Sarah and weep for him. And Avraham stood up from before his dead and spake unto his sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger, and I am a resident with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And he goes on, and he goes on, and he goes on. And there are three interesting sections to these verses for me. First, the way they break up the age of Sarah at her death, which is important to our conversation today. Second, that Avraham saw himself as a stranger in the land of the sons of Heth. And third, that the sons of Heth did not view him as a stranger, but they saw him as a prince. Is that not weird? I mean, if you were just reading that on your own, would you not come to that yourself? He says, I'm a stranger and a sojourner among you. It sounds like he's talking to people he doesn't know. And they look at him and they say, no, you're a prince to us. You're a prince in our land. You can have whatever you want. And the man that he speaks to actually gives him the field that the cave is on. He says, I give you the field and I give you the cave. It's yours. Take it. He says, no, I'm going to pay for it. It's worthy of its pay. So 400 shekels, what is it between us? But he pays for it anyway. But regarding the first verse, the rabbis asked the question, why does the Torah split up the tally of Sarah's years into three parts? 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. To tell us that every day of her life was the equivalent of them all. At the age of 100 years, she was like age 20 in strength. And at the age of 20, she was like the age of 7 in modesty and purity. At the age of 7, she was like the age of 20 in intelligence. And at the age of 20, she was like the age 100 in righteousness. Sarah is a timeless being in the eyes of the ancients. Her age did not matter. It was this circular reference again coming up. She has remained timeless today because she continues to live in and through us as we bring her legacy to life every day that we walk the earth. Every Shabbat, we bless our daughters. We bless them like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. We bring the ancients into the modern world through the blessing of our children, hoping that they too will impact the earth in the same manner that our matriarchs have. Timeless she is. The second most interesting section of the passage addresses the words that Avraham uses in dialogue with the sons of Heth. He says, I am a stranger and I am a resident among you. This is also kind of, this word is translated like a resident alien, which in the physical represents someone that may live in the land but lacks the right to basic freedoms because he's not a citizen of their land. So he can't buy land, and he doesn't have credit, and that kind of thing. But when you're researching the history of this passage, one will find that people like Abraham, resident aliens, were unable to purchase land because they were not permanent citizens, but they were regarded as nomadic. So Abraham came to the sons of Heth to petition a place to bury his dead. And the deeper, more spiritual impact of this statement, I am a stranger and a resident, is found in the fact that the people of God are called to be present in this world, but they are not of it. You see, he was a priest of a different kingdom. And he knew that he was the priest of a different kingdom. He spoke directly to God. 1 John 2:17 says, "And the world passes away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever." What does that even mean, abideth forever? You see, this world was not our beginning. Our souls long to return to God, and daily our bodies wrestle between what the Spirit desires, and that is to dwell with God, and what the flesh inherently seeks, that is the self-satisfaction for itself. The soul desires to be where it belongs. That's why it's our job to make an abode for God in this earth. That's the soul's mission. Our soul understands that our origin is from the timeless, boundless God of all things. And our flesh sees ourselves as this own little God, little g. But we are strangers as long as we are living in the Spirit. We are residents in the world, and the Torah instructs us to live our lives in the physical reality solely to inhabit it and elevate it back to its origin, back to God. You know that this was God's and is God's still. Genesis 1:28 says, "God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it." Replenish the earth. I won't get into that, but maybe another time. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Virtually all the commandments of the Torah are physical actions involving physical objects, in keeping with the mission of God's people to make a dwelling for God in the material realm. There's an ancient rabbi, Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who's the Chabad rabbi who lived from 1745 to 1812, and he wrote the Tanya. And in the Tanya it states that God desired a dwelling place in the lowly realms. He desired that there be a realm that is lowly and distant from him, a world that is inhospitable to his presence. In other words, a mundane physical world, and that man would transform this world into an abode for his manifest presence. This is what man is about. You understand that Yeshua said the same thing. Go into all the world ministering the gospel of the kingdom coming. Make it an abode for me, that I might come and bring my presence. Purpose of man's creation and of the creation of all the worlds, supernal and ephemeral. In Judaism, like Christianity, the responsibility to make a home on the earth for God is the central mission of our faith. Whether that home is with your own family or with others, we are to make that which is eternal come alive to those that are dead. Bring the timeless into our timeline and see how when you bend our beginnings over onto our endings, time loses its landscape and becomes a circle, bringing back our spirits in communion with the God of creation. Our true home and beginning is a higher, loftier place, the world of the Spirit, a place of holiness and godliness. The true place that we were formed in the beginning, this is the place that our souls have been exiled from, where they yearn to return. The believer can know the depth of his relationship with God by the degree to which he feels a stranger in the world. If you want to know how well you are, how close you are to God, how strange do you feel around you? Simple. The closer you get to something you cannot see, something you cannot understand or comprehend, the further away you get from what is called reality. And when you come to reality, it feels strange. You feel as if you're an alien. Here come the men in black. It's the same idea. The closer connected you are to the spirit world outside of this material world ultimately protects you and enables you to avoid being wholly consumed and overwhelmed by the material, maintaining the spiritual vision and integrity required to elevate this world and sanctify it as a dwelling place for the Shekhinah. Today's message is about time, but more importantly, it's about eternity. You see, eternity is the time that cannot be measured. Eternity can be defined as having neither beginning and or end. Our shortfall in understanding this concept of endless time is clearly due to the fact that we have seen a beginning. Each of you here at some point in eternity was born, given life through birth, and we cannot grasp eternity in the fullest sense primarily to this point. However, we must realize that eternity is now our true reality, the moment we say, Yeshua, be my Mashiach. Even if it does conflict with our perceived reality, though you had a beginning, doesn't mean that eternity has one also. Each of you experience time on a different frequency. Some of us are planting, others of us are reaping, some of us are breaking down, others of us are building up. Regardless where we are in the process, we are all required as believers to listen for God's pattern and instruction, His Torah. Listening requires our attention in the stillness where time ends. To be still and know that He is God is listening for His voice and His instruction. To be still is literally the recognition of eternity. You know that. To be still is recognizing eternity exists. The place where our perceived reality, our time and landscape ends, and God's true reality manifests for us. We are able to go to a new place when this happens. We're able to dream dreams. We're able to see visions. We're able to experience miracles. All in the stillness of time. All these things happen, which is eternity. Be a priest as you are called to be. One like Melchizedek. Melchizedek did not have a beginning or an end. Melchizedek was not recorded his history because he was timeless. However, I believe that Melchizedek lived his life in this eternity with God and not in the temporary as many of us do today. Even though Melchizedek, king of Salem, this king of peace, this righteous judge, was a real man that was born and that died. The Bible makes an example of him, that he was eternal, just as we are eternal. Do not see timelines, but see time as Melchizedek, as Abraham, as Yeshua, as Paul, Peter, James, and John, where time is a continual cycle of beginnings and endings. Amen. It is our duty to praise the Master of all, to ascribe greatness to the author of creation. For he made us unlike the nations of the lands, and has not placed us like the families of the earth. He's not made our portion like theirs, and our lot like all their multitudes. We bend the knee and bow and acknowledge our thanks before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he. He stretches out heaven, established earth's foundation, and the seat of his glory is in the heavens above, in the presence of his power, in the most exalted heights. He's our God, there's none other. True is our King, there is none beside him. As it is written in his Torah, you shall know this day, and take to your heart, that the Lord, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth below.